Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give you all a couple of moments to get settled and get in. We are very happy that you are joining us this afternoon. I almost said morning, but it is now 12 noon. So welcome. Feel free to utilize the chat, say hi. We like the interaction. We like engagement. We're going to get started at about 12:01. Just to give everybody a chance to make sure that their audio is working. You have something to drink. Feel free to enjoy lunch. If you're eating lunch, let us know what you're having. Give us some great ideas for when this is over, what we can have for lunch. As a pet parent, I will say, can you hear me now? Is the volume better? Okay. I just wanted to make sure. All right. Thanks for that insight, Trish. I just wanted to make sure you could hear us. Wonderful. I hope everybody is doing well. I think I turned my volume up too loud. That ding was very loud. We want to welcome you all to When AI Gets It Wrong, the false green flags and why human oversight matters. Today's webinar sponsored and brought to you by Exude Human Capital. And for those of you who do not know, Exude Human Capital is a boutique HR firm based out of Philadelphia, PA. We are not your typical consulting firm. Since our founding back in 2006, we've been on a mission to transform organizations by connecting the dots between human resources, leadership development, and inclusion and belonging. And I have had the esteemed pleasure of working with Exude for closely 5 years now. So I will introduce myself and my colleagues that will be joining us today. My name is RoMaine, KJ Wise. My pronouns are she, her. I am a senior consultant with Exude Human Capital with over 2 decades of HR progressive experience. I absolutely love what I do and engaging with our clients on a daily basis to help them transform their organizations into places where people want to work, where they can thrive and can be the best version of themselves. And I am joined today by two of my favorite people at Exude, Nick and John, and I will let them introduce themselves to you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Nick DiCicco. I'm a senior client advisor here at Exude Human Capital. Been with Exude for about 2.5 years. Prior to that, I have about 20 years of experience in corporate recruiting and HR.
Nice.
Thank you, Nick. I'll go next. So I'm John Degnan. I am also a senior client advisor here at Exude. I've been here for about 7 months, and prior to that, I spent 17 years in talent acquisition, including a foundation in executive search, both domestic and abroad. Worked a few years in the RPO and consulting side of things, and then led a U.S. Talent acquisition function for about 6 years prior to joining here. Majority of my experience was in the life sciences space, but I'm very happy to be here.
Nice. We also have our amazing marketing director on the call with us. She is under the Exude Human Capital name. If you have any issues or technical issues, please just message her directly, and we are here to support. If you have not joined a webinar with us before, please know these are different. We like the interaction. We welcome the questions and the comments. We invite you to utilize the chat function throughout the duration of today's webinar because we can answer in real time. And we really welcome your insight and observations and experiences to share along in today's conversation. So with that being said, let's get started. Our agenda for today, we're going to discuss how AI has transformed how we recruit, some of the hidden biases in AI driven recruiting process, why human oversight is so important and how much it is really, really needed, and some key learnings that we have obtained throughout our individual engagement with AI in the recruitment process, both as recruiters as well as consultants with some of our clients. So that's our agenda for today. And I'm sure our time is going to go by fast. So I think we kind of, dive in. All right. Are you with me, fellas? You ready to go?
Oh, yeah.
Let's go. All right. Let's start with a interactive poll. We have a question that we want to pose to you. The question is, how many of you are using AI in your recruiting process? And if so, what parts of your recruitment process? So we'll give a few minutes for everybody to respond. How are you using AI? Are you using AI in your recruiting process? Yes or no? And if so, how are you using AI? And you can answer multiple choices on question 2. Are you using it for job descriptions, resume screenings, candidate communication, interview scheduling, or other? Give everybody a couple moments to respond, and we'll have the responses in real time in a second. I'm excited to see how people are utilizing it, if people are utilizing it more or less. Oh,
Okay.
so
I actually expected higher than 2/3,
me
interestingly.
too.
Yeah.
We have some folks that are utilizing it, and it looks like there's kind of a split between the job description portion, the candidate communication.
Hmm.
Um, I'm shocked at the underutilization for interview scheduling. That one surprises me. How about you all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a surprising one for sure. Because as we'll kind of cover on some of the incoming slides, coordination, it can be the bane of your existence, right? When you're really trying to do it manually.
Mhm.
And that was kind of one of the first places that I started using the tools myself.
I'm interested to know what other is.
I was just about to
Yeah.
say the same thing. Anybody in the chat want to tell us what their other components are? We welcome the insight. Michelle says she's not a recruiter, but she uses AI often for other things. Yeah, we would love to know what the others are. So if you can drop those in the chat, that would be great. Um, and we'll address those as they come in. But we
Hmm.
have seen that AI is transforming the recruiting process presently, and it kind of captures a lot of the steps from the candidate experience, meaning, personalizing job recommendations and AI first impressions, sourcing and talent discovery. It kind of helps with automating the response time, which I know has been a pain point as a former recruiter. The response time and the candidate engagement can be such an obstacle with all of the correspondence that needs to go back and forth. And AI can definitely assist with that, with either establishing interview schedules, automating that process. So once people kind of get through pre-screening, they can set up their interview dates and times automatically without all of the back and forth that happens with communications. Um, the AI assisted interviews, the conducting interviews, scoring responses, and identifying competencies, that is very high level of utilization with AI. And then the job description optimization. I think this is one of my favorite sources for utilizing AI. Is I write a lot of job descriptions, but making sure that they are tailored to be inclusive. And we'll talk about that later in some of the other slides. But how have you all, and I will open this up to John and Nick, how has AI transformed the recruiting process from your vantage points?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned on the last slide, I think scheduling was probably one of the first things to easily just let go of and hand that to AI, simply because it's just so time consuming to go from internal to external, aligned calendars, knowing that you're reaching out multiple times and trying to coordinate things. Even when you have someone on your team that's supporting that, it just sucks up so much time, for them too. So scheduling for sure was the first one to go. I think reporting is another big one. I remember the days where I'd have to pull reports from like Microsoft Access, or I'm just like building through things through multiple Excel sheets and trying to like, I don't know, create these like Frankenstein type reports. And so having a situation where, the system is able to kind of automate it, send it to you when you want it. You don't have to go seeking it anymore. That's incredibly helpful because again, I remember afternoons just wasted trying to pull that kind of stuff together. I think it's great from a compliance standpoint too, just because it's just good ensuring like when you're onboarding folks and you're making sure that you're getting the proper documentation, that the candidate is getting messaging on a good cadence. So, it's not something where someone is manually forgetting about it and be like, oh, I had these first 4 people, but I forgot about, John, who is starting as well on the 5th, and now I have to send it to him at the last minute. That stuff is great. Obviously what it ties into those, you still have to, this is where the human element comes into play. You absolutely have to inspect all this on the back end as well. Because a lot of times what AI will be doing is it is learning from, what is existing before. And sometimes if there's flaws in that, it will begin to replicate some of that.
How about you, Nick? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think one thing is, especially on the speed and analytics side, recruiters are now, there's dashboards and automated reports and instant screening insights, and that speeds up decision making on the recruiter end of it, but it also increases the risk of really relying too heavily on the metrics instead of their own human judgment and the reason they were a successful recruiter in the first place. In terms of sourcing and talent discovery, it certainly opens up the talent pool a lot. AI tools can scan and review huge amounts of data quickly and resumes and profiles and things like that. But it also means that if there's any embedded biases in those tools, those scale quickly. As the more you use the tool, the more it's reinforced that they're providing the right profiles, that it just kind of deepens and worsens the bias that's embedded in it.
It's great.
Any other thoughts or comments about how we're utilizing? I saw in the comments some of the other comments came back, and one of our participants stated that she utilizes it to help with interview prep and designing an approach to coaching segments because she's also a leadership coach, as well as using it to help with recommendations for social media, travel logistics, and beyond. And I can attest, utilizing AI for travel has been a game changer, but we'll talk about that in a future webinar. We won't talk about that. When we think about the AI, and a lot of times this conversation comes up, is what are some of the hidden biases that are showing up and why this human insight is so very important for me, and I'll prompt this conversation, and I welcome the stories and the specifics that you all want to share. The data collection for me is always a question that I ask any vendor that is trying to offer a tool or a resource, and asking where they're pulling their data from. Like, where are the algorithms being developed? How is this being prompted? Where are you pulling this information from? Because if the information in the data is flawed, the output is going to be flawed. So I think that is one of the very key factors that needs to be addressed in uncovering some of the hidden biases that may be built into some of these systems. Some of the other things are like the promptings. What words or terms are we utilizing? Have we all really been fully trained on effective prompting with AI? I know a lot of times we utilize it to change the tones of emails and to draft correspondence, but there are some specific things that we should be asking it to do in a way to mitigate the bias and making sure we're not having disparate impact on the groups that we are trying to recruit. So making sure, and as a tip, as you'll see on the bottom of the screen, one of the prompting tips is before proceeding, one of the prompts that you can utilize, and this is a good nugget for us to share with our group today, is the prompt of before proceeding, identify who may be unintentionally disadvantaged by this approach and how we can reduce that risk. Ask AI to answer the question for you, and it will identify where there may be some disadvantages. And I feel like I'm talking too much. So I'm going to lean into you all to kind of give some other places that you've seen hidden bias show up in any insights that you may have.
Yeah, one thing I just in some articles I've read, it kind of goes to a couple of these, the prompting and the like me pattern matching. So, for example, one thing that some organizations might do is to upload the resumes and criteria and profiles of people currently in those roles and say, hey, we want to, these people have the right background, so this is what we want to identify as the appropriate candidates that we want to move forward with. But there are some very basic things that can miss. For example, if I'm going to make up numbers here. Let's say you upload 20 resumes and let's say 15 of them are male. When new resumes come in and they have what might be considered unassuming words, like in the, 2/3 of the way down the resume, it mentions that they were on the women's chess team or the women's volleyball team. Because the other resumes don't have the word women's in it, it can screen those out as not being something that aligns with the rest of what you've already identified as successful candidates. So it doesn't, it's not, sometimes it's not blatant, right? It's not obvious as to what it is, but little things like that can make a difference. So it really does require the oversight and the auditing that, to make sure that what's going in is appropriate. AI is only as fair as what we teach it, right? If data is biased or it's missing a bunch of people, the system's just going to keep making those same mistakes without even realizing it.
I think you should put that on a t-shirt, Nick.
Well, yeah, all of it.
I think it would totally sell.
The whole thing.
What about you, John? What?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, bro.
No, I was just going to ask you kind of what areas have you seen some of the hidden biases and identifying that. I'd love to hear your insight.
Yeah. So Nick kind of touched on one of them, and I sort of touched on it just a little bit a couple slides ago, but was the repeating behaviors that you've already done. Again, it's something where you don't necessarily know if companies are just comfortable with a certain profile or there's a specific roadmap on what you're supposed to be doing, but there's the risk that what you're getting fed basically just repeats what has already happened. There's one specific incident that always kind of stands out in my head as to why you really need to just kind of still think for yourself. And when I was in my last company on the corporate side, we were filling a director level role. And I remember I was talking with one of my recruiters, and there was somebody in this particular profile that had, I think it was like Six Sigma experience, maybe a couple other things that we really were like, hey, this will benefit the group, even though it's not in the job description. Her titles from a, lining up perspective were not aligned. It wasn't like she was holding this is a director of, say, quality. Her titles did not resemble that at all. But we felt very strongly that she was going to adjust really well to an environment like this. And so we had like a consultative conversation with I guess it was the global head of QA about this. And ultimately, we got her through to the interview process. She was phenomenal. She's hired and, she's doing as far as I understand, she's still doing a great job. So, I mean, I still think of that scenario in my head and I say, how could AI replicate a scenario like this? And I've yet to see it happen, which is why I think the human, oversight of it all is still so important. Now there's a balance to this, right? Because if we're using this to save ourselves time or speed things up, but then we have to audit it, are we saving time? Like that's a big question.
Well, I would say it definitely helps the setup process. The audit is the nature of what we do as HR practitioners. We're always double checking for compliance. I think what happens is sometimes, and what I've seen is that there is an increase of quantity of applicants, but not necessarily quality applicants, and that there is a missing portion. So going back to double check, especially in places where I've seen them use like color coding systems where they will red, green, yellow individuals. Reds are people they're excluding. Yellows are kind of like the maybes. Greens are the people that are automated or automatically kind of scheduled for that next phase and invited to set up conversations. The yellows, I would always encourage to go back and double check, only because there is a discrepancy sometimes with how titling happens, to your point, John. And then for individuals who may have had larger gaps in their employment history, sometimes can get excluded from that green pool because of timing, depending on what metrics we're asking or prompting the systems to utilize for looking back for experience. So if you have someone who has 20 years of experience, but in the last 4 years, they've been a caregiver for a family member and not have been active in a role, they may get excluded because of the recency bias that the system may be looking for. So you could possibly risk losing that candidate or that applicant for the process because they haven't worked in a recent time frame, but have all of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you're looking for the role because of the way you prompted the system or the way that the system is pulling information. So the audit is going to be very important to make sure that we don't skip over somebody who may be just that talent that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I mean, especially on the executive search side, I scrutinize things all the time. There were always times where I said, "This is what we were supposed to look for," but think of it like something you would do athletically. The play breaks down, and you have to think differently. You have to think, "What can I tweak?" And again, you're thinking of this, but AI is not likely to replicate it in the same manner.
Yeah, you got to call an audible.
You got to call an audible. You know it.
Is that right, Nick?
Right, pivot.
Got to pivot.
And in addition to just, I mean, everything we're talking about so far really is about making sure we don't exclude candidates because we don't want to miss out on great candidates and things like that. But I mean, very quickly, this is also becoming a legal issue as well. California just passed regulations that make it pretty clear that employers must maintain human oversight. AI tools have to be audited and documented, and it really reinforces the idea that humans are still accountable, even if you're using AI to screen things out. And humans are accountable for AI-assisted decisions. And right now, it started in California, like a lot of things do from a legal perspective. But eventually, this is probably going to become more mainstream. That there are safeguards and regulations put in check that these things must be audited and reported on.
Yeah. I think the big piece and the one that I think that sticks out to me also on this list is that confidence and communication styles. So if you're leveraging AI to interpret some of like the video interviews that people are utilizing now to screen out, if you have individuals who may talk in a softer, calmer tone, they may score lower, or individuals who may have different types of accents or use different sentence structures, they may receive lower scores. I always try to think about things that impact individuals with a different processing or neurodiversity, where their social engagement is slightly different, what is perceived to be normal or typical. And sometimes that comes across in some of these AI analyzed video interviews or screening tools that may disqualify somebody because they don't have this big personality, or their global accent may be hard for the system to interpret. So we need to make sure that we are paying attention to all of those nuances and really kind of thinking about intentionally who could we possibly be omitting by letting AI lead the decision. Even though they're assisting, it's kind of they're giving us that first batch and making sure we set up those prompts and ensure that the data collection is accurate and is being pulled from reliable sources is very important. We did put a handout, just so everybody's aware, in the chat. There's a handout that comes with attending today that is responsible AI in recruiting. It's a great kind of best practice tool that you can download, and will be readily available to all of those watching and all of those who come back to watch for the replay. So I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that. Gentlemen, anything else that you want to add to the hidden bias conversation as before we proceed on? This is great conversation.
Only thing I was going to add was just I thought that was a phenomenal point about how a video interview, gauges a human, because I can think of so many scenarios in my life where my recruiting life where I wanted to, you could tell someone was a little tight to start, and you use your personality or approach to like bring the temperature down, loosen them up. And I can't tell you how many good candidates I found that way, where, I could tell initially, if I just, as they say, judge the first minute of the conversation, my thought might have been different than how I finished. But again, that's something that humans can do. And I haven't seen AI, kind of pivot like that. So
yeah, there's still a connection when we do human-to-human contact.
Yeah.
There's space for us to learn and kind of meet each other where we are. AI is going to be very matter of fact, where we as humans give space for a spectrum of responses and know how to pivot kind of on a dime. Now I have to watch that episode of Friends. It's in my head now. Thanks. So when we think about the hidden bias, they usually show up when, as we just stated, metrics replaces judgment and speed replaces reflection. So we're looking at trying to make things happen so much faster and being able to be more efficient, but we have taken away that opportunity to kind of reflect and look at all of the pieces that may be missing. What happens a lot of times is, as we've learned with AI, similarity will become that repeat. It will do what is taught, and that could possibly replace potential. So we want to make sure that we're not leaning solely into getting the quantity of candidates that AI will produce, but that we're also giving the human oversight so that we have the quality that we need as well. Any thoughts or comments about the hidden biases that may show up? Anything that I could have missed?
I think one of the things in terms of metrics, on the other side of it, you think about AI from the candidate side of things. It's actually making it much easier for candidates to apply to jobs. You can set up, you set it up so that your resume is being sent to jobs you didn't even see or review yet, based just on certain criteria. The result of that is that companies are being absolutely inundated with applicants that may or may not have anything to do with the actual job that they're recruiting or hiring for. So what do they do with that? They're overwhelmed. The shortcut is to let AI grade everybody like it's, a math test with a simple right or wrong answer. And that's a pretty blunt tool and that can, a lot of times that can kick out some of the best candidates because they didn't check every single box. So some of that nuance that we as career recruiters or HR professionals have learned and developed over the course of time is basically being ignored when we rely too heavily on AI screening metrics.
Well, and I think it's lending to a lot of the complaints that you're getting from the job seeking market as well, right? Because think about how many people are trying to funnel into the one area, and it's not just them doing it manual anymore. It's bot-like behavior and spraying a lot of things out there. In a way, like the technology, while time saving for you, the job seeker, and thinking of it like buying lottery tickets, you're buying more lottery tickets, it's actually diluting the process at the same time.
That's a very valid point. That is a very valid point, John. It also creates, and what I've heard from individuals who are currently job seeking, feeling like they're not sure if they're really talking to a human right now. Like
Correct.
they do the automatic callbacks and the automatic text, and it feels very engaging until you realize that you're talking to a robot. And then it's like, well, I have a question I want to ask. And then you get, wrapped around in the loop of trying to get to a person. I don't know if anybody else has had that experience where you're trying to make a phone call and you're just screaming representative at the top of your voice to get through to someone. Uh, and it becomes this ongoing, I just need to talk to a person. I just need to talk to a person. I just need to talk to a person. And in the wake of where we are with AI and the evolution of it, you really have to double check to make sure that the applicant that you're receiving is a real person. And on the other side, that the recruiter you're talking to is a real person. And if it's not, making sure that the system and the AI tool is set up so that it is able to make those audible decisions and decision making and filter to the right individual human for the oversight component. I think that's a major key that a lot of organizations are possibly overlooking right now as we all kind of continue to learn and grow in this AI generative evolution that we're in. I think I couldn't think of a word to say it. But I definitely welcome the insight. Do we have any thoughts or comments from any of our participants? Any questions that you all have? Again, please feel free to put those in the chat in real time so we can address those. I think it's important that we kind of dive into the human oversight and how much is really needed. AI should support. This is not going to replace us. It's to augment the process. It's to kind of lend into helping us be more efficient in what we do. But human judgment in recruitment is a must. We must review the filters. We must participate in the final interviews. We must monitor the bias in the data, and ensure that there's alignment with company culture. So we talked about the regular audits and the reviews of non-selected candidates and a thorough vendor vetting promise. I want to kind of pause right there. And I think starting with the vendor vetting prompt, and I will kind of lean into to you and to John and Nick. When you're vetting vendors, what are some of the questions that you would want to ask a vendor? Before making a selection to utilize their tools? What are the things that, as you know, esteemed recruiters in your professional experience, that you would want to make sure are being addressed? I don't know who wants to go first.
You want to go first on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of vetting vendors, I mean, you want to understand what they're using from a filtering perspective, what words they're using from a prompting perspective. Obviously, like you would any vendor, you want references and you want to talk to those references. Don't just send an email because you're checking a box that you have to get 3 references to be able to put together a purchase order, right? You really want to understand what the benefits are that that individual vendor is providing, what areas of the recruiting process they're going to inject the AI into, and how they're going to do it. You need to understand it from beginning to end, because if there's an issue at the end of the day, they're not going to call in AI to explain what the process was that they went through, right? It's your responsibility as an HR professional to make sure that you understand, the idea that, the vendor said it was great and that it cut out bias. Like, that's not good enough, right? You need to understand what is it doing? What active steps is that vendor taking with its software to be able to mitigate bias and to produce the results you're looking for.
Yeah, I would even say it's funny, the human element plays in a little bit here too, where those managing the relationship, you want to make sure they really understand what they're selling, right? Because it's easy enough to just take a very popular trend right now and repeat it and try to repeat it over and over again. But you want to understand that if there is a true issue, the people that you are interfacing with, the people that you're working with, can help you kind of dive into their toolbox and help you understand the type of product that you are buying. So funny enough, I think the human relationship you're going to have with these vendors is just as important as the product itself. Beyond that, I totally agree with Nick. I think, you just want to make sure you understand how it works, what are blind spots. I think I kind of look at it almost like a job interview to an extent, where, yeah, you told me everything that's great about this, but where can I get caught? Like, if I'm integrating this, what are the common, mistakes that you have, or are the common problems you run into when you're trying to onboard the software? For my company size, what kind of experience have you seen with that? Because again, some of these platforms, you can tell they're designed for certain industries or certain company sizes better than others. These things aren't always one size fits all. So I feel like I would do a lot of probing into kind of that sort of thing too. Because again, the idea when you're using something like this is more optimization, not necessarily full replacement. Certainly it could impact how many resources you use and how you use them, but it should not. It should make everything stronger, not purely replace it.
Yeah. There's a comment in that vendors need to demonstrate clear return on investments that impact business.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to make sure everybody saw that comment. And excuse me, it's imperative that when we think about the checking of references, that we're not just looking or asking the nice questions. We have to ask the hard questions. And it's okay. It's okay to say the awkward thing. It's okay to say the thing that might be deemed kind of constructive is a nice way to say it. And I think I'm trying to wordsmith this here, but asking a vendor, where they're pulling their data from, how are they ensuring that bias is being mitigated? We were on a call with the vendor and I asked that question and they couldn't answer me. And honestly, after that, I stopped listening. I'll be fully transparent. I was like, okay, I'm done. Because I can understand how even something as simple as someone's name can disqualify them depending on how the system is prompted. So looking into that, checking the references, the audit and testing is going to be very important. Start with a pilot. I encourage my clients that if they're going to start with an automated process, that you do it for one role. Don't do all the roles at one time. Test the theories. I think that's very important. Test and see, making sure that you document. I am very much inclined to see someone do a study, and maybe this is something we can address, is what is the retention rate for an AI generated applicant versus the completely human oversight recruiter? Like, what's the difference? How long does tenure impact? What does it say about success rates and retention within organizations? I would love to see some of these vendors provide that type of feedback in a comparison study, because it's just the way my brain works, and I'm very much inclined to continue to learn and grow in this industry, in this market, and utilizing this tool. Where is the differentiating factors where success is concerned? Just not the compliance and the legal aspect and making sure we mitigate that risk, but also what is the success factor? The cultural fits is a phrase that anybody who knows me knows I am not a fan of cultural fits. I like culture adds. What can people bring to an organization? If we are formatting questions and filters to kind of give us the fit of an organization, then we're going to continue to recycle the same types of individuals. So I encourage that if we're going to use culture fits, we also use culture adds to make sure that we're enhancing our talent pool and thinking about the things that are currently missing in our organizations and what someone's different perspective can bring into an organization compared to replicating who was in that role before.
And AI can't really determine cultural fit, let alone cultural add, right? They're going to have an even harder time trying to find that person who isn't the cookie cutter of what you've loaded into it to match against, to prompt against. That's where human judgment plays such a key role in filling in those gaps and ensuring that decisions aren't exclusively made by automated scoring and blunt math tests.
Yes.
Yep.
Agree. That transferable skill, the things that come up in conversation, especially with people that are looking to change industry. One thing I can say is human resources is going to be human resources wherever you do it. You're resourcing humans, you're dealing with the compliance, you're dealing with the talent, you're dealing with performance. It's easier, but you think about those soft skills that people obtain in the roles that they have and kind of bringing that forward is very hard to do if you're just going through an algorithm. It may be a mismatch of wording. It may not be optimized in whatever the filtration system is. So we may lose that. So I think human oversight, it really adds value when we're thinking about people transitioning from one industry to another, or having those like mid-career cycle changes with professional development and wanting to try something different, but able to bring those soft skills that may not always translate very well
Mhm.
on their resumes or on whatever systems they're using that is automating those process. So that is just one of, my major takeaways, because I find that's what happens when we have the conversations, when we really get into the tangible interactions with people and we learn about them, not just the job that they do, but them as the whole person.
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard enough conversation sometimes to happen person to person, let alone person to, AI system. So, yeah, I don't see how it could replicate. Like I said, if you have a truly strategic minded person who's going to look at that with you and look at it like building a puzzle and how does it fit next to the pieces, AI is not doing that.
Mm-mm.
I
It's
think one of the things that gets overlooked from the recruiting process, as it relates to AI, is when you're a recruiter for an organization, you're also just trying to figure out like who do you want to work with, right? This person is going to be a colleague of yours. AI can't screen out for that. AI can't look at, personality or how a person shows up or presents themselves or any of those things. It really it you really need the human element to ensure fairness and accountability.
accountability, a word that we do not use often enough presently, I think.
Mhm.
Total different webinar for a total different thing. But we'll
Yeah.
talk about accountability. How about we offer some tips for some of responsible hiring within AI? um the purpose, and we can kind of take this in conversation. I love the way this is flowing. The purpose and the use of clarity. Some of the red flags that we're currently seeing is that we're using it because everyone else is. No, you want to make sure you have a very clear purpose and utilization for how you're going to leverage AI. Is this going to be an instrument that you're going to use to automate scheduling, to help you write more inclusive job descriptions? If you're going to use this as a screening application, how is it going to be applied? Just to say that you're utilizing AI for the sake of utilizing AI is not responsible. It's not just because everybody else is doing it. No, you need to make sure that for your organizations, you have set a clear purpose and a use case and understand kind of what that band is or that parameter is, especially as you go through that initial testing and piloting, is going to be
Mhm.
very important.
I just want to add to that that's not even financially responsible because you don't even know A, why you're using it. And I'll give you an example. I've been to some networking events where you speak with people about a certain product, and the product has levels, right? And when they sell the product at the highest level, this is what it's supposed to be. But you have a lot of these corporate environments that are adopting a less expensive version of the product, and it's not what it's basically sold to be anyway. So then the question is, what kind of bang for your buck are you getting? You're basically just trying to have a label on, and say, hey, I'm using this because it was an initiative we were told to do,
Mhm.
but you're not really optimizing the product and you're probably wasting cash anyway.
Yeah. So think about it from a financial standpoint. Nick, you were
Yeah.
going to say something. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and as obviously we need to understand not just how we're using it, but why and what's, like one of the viewers mentioned earlier, what's the ROI? But the other thing is, like I said, with the conversation we've had about the biases, you know, AI should be brought in to solve problems you've already defined within the organization and within your recruiting process, not to create new ones. Without to lack that human oversight, it brings up a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
When we think about the bias and fairness safeguards, a lot of the red flags that I've seen is companies say, well, the vendor said it was unbiased. We got to do a little bit more due diligence there, folks. We have to make sure we are assessing how the data is collected, how the algorithms are set up, what the prompts are going to initiate. Just leaning into the vendors telling you that it's unbiased is not responsible.
And one of the things is not just, maybe off the shelf, it has some built-in things to help with bias, but how is it ongoing? How is it, what are the steps that it's taking to, this bias mitigation that needs to be ongoing and intentional? And how, what layers has the company built in to, we're going to do a check every X amount of applicants or every X amount of weeks or months or things like that to make sure, because things change. The way people, the phrasing people use changes, words people use changes. What you're looking for as an organization can change. So not just off the box, it has these preset parameters that
Mhm.
help mitigate bias, but how do you keep it improving throughout the course of the time you're using the product?
Yeah. Some of the other responsible things to look at is the data and the privacy um, and consent, making sure that people understand how their information is going to be utilized and how AI is going to be leveraged, being very transparent with that from both the candidate experience and then being very clear internally for your organizations. How are we going to use this data? Who's going to have access to it? What consents and privacy practices need to be set in place to make sure we're safeguarding not only the organizations we work for, but the people that are applying is very, very important.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge data integrity one right there. If you can't be transparent about it or you don't know where it's coming from, and you're already halfway in trouble.
Yeah. Anyone who knows me knows I am very much an advocate for accessibility and inclusion. It is near and dear to my heart. So I just want to make sure that we call in the necessary component of making sure that if we're doing assessments, any automated assessments, that they are inclusive of those that have learning differences, and making sure that they're accessible to everyone, depending on their level of physical ability as well as mental and aptitude. So the assessment should be not one size fits all, but they should be able to kind of speak to all of the populations that we want to have opportunities within our organization. And sometimes that's making sure that there is inclusion for people that have physical differences, difference in knowledge, processing and things like that. So I am very big on making sure that we're not just automating for the sake of automating, but we're being inclusive and still being accessible to everybody that is trying to obtain opportunity and grow their careers.
Yep. And that extends to people with different communication styles. Like you mentioned earlier, people that may have accents, maybe English isn't their first language.
Right,
Things like that don't make someone less qualified for a role.
right,
Mhm.
right. They may work differently, doesn't mean they're not capable of doing the job.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Some of the other things that we want to look at, and this is part of the handout that we have prepared for all of our participants as a download, but we want to make sure that there's some kind of candidate experience and dignity, making sure people aren't ghosting via automation.
Mhm.
People take ghosting very personal.
Yeah.
Professionally, personally, it can be a very triggering thing for individuals. So making sure that the communication is there and that the candidate experience is really built out so that there's a level of engagement from the time people click on your link to explore opportunities up and through the time that they onboard. There should be an experience that is had that makes your place of employment the ideal
Mhm.
place to engage with.
That's such a hot topic right now, too, for reasons we've suggested earlier, where you have an overabundance of candidates coming to a job. But on the flip side, we do know that budgets have been cut, teams have been trimmed down, and again, the human side of it has gotten smaller in some cases.
Yeah.
Um, and just as a job seeker, I saw it a little bit myself a little over a year ago, and I know what some other people are going through. When you're encountering something where your first interaction is with, I don't know, robot, computer, AI, whatever you want to call it, um, at best, people kind of accept it. At worst, it's very off-putting because I don't know, you don't feel like the company's really investing any time to even like vet you or really get to know you or anything like that for all the reasons we mentioned before. There's no human feel. And so I think it's a very cold feeling when someone, say, goes through a process like that where they go to apply, they're talking to a chat robot. The next thing you know, they get a rejection, email, or they get nothing. Maybe they never get anything at all, a day later. And it's just, again, it's just not, talk about not good for, candidate experience, not good for branding. So I think it's, especially in the beginning of the process, I don't think it's great to rely too heavily on it.
Yeah. Any other tips or things that you want to add for individuals? Any final thoughts that you want to leave with our participants today? Why human oversight is so important. And we also want to kind of make sure we have time if anyone has any questions or comments, but I wanted to afford you gentlemen an opportunity to share some final thoughts.
The one thing I just wanted to point out again, I know we mentioned it before, but it's listed there as number 10, is that if you're going to do it, if you're going to go the AI route, even to just test it out, it can't be set it and forget it. It's got to be
Mm-hmm.
constant interaction with the system, oversight of the system, you know, humans looking at the resumes that were rejected on a regular cadence and making sure that those are the correct resumes that should have been rejected, and understanding why.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously this is probably a bigger initiative at the larger the company, because that, increased volume, increased number of positions, things like that. But if you're not there now, it's going to be soon. And make sure you're using it responsibly, and not just from a ethical perspective, but from a legal perspective too.
Thanks, Nick. John, any
Yeah,
final?
I would say, we all want to optimize how we work. We all want to find ways to save time. But, for everyone on the call, like, never forget what got you to where you are. Own the strategic vision of what you're doing, and use this to supplement and, support, versus kind of giving, as they say, just handing it off to it. Because again, I think at the end of the day, the creativity and the true strategy is going to come from the human side of it. And just let this help you do some of the brainstorming, the blocking and tackling, but like never give up your own strategic vision to this, the systems basically.
Excellent. Well, we want to thank you all for your engagement today. Just so you all know, Exude Human Capital can provide an outside review of your recruitment process and look through the lens of potential biases to help you mitigate any possible bias in your process. We can help your team understand and create a process for human oversight. So if you're looking for resources with that, feel free to reach out to any of us. Our email addresses are listed here on the screen, and we are more than happy to kind of help you in that regard and offer support as we all kind of navigate this new AI world together. All right. I thank you for your participation and your engagement today. Gentlemen, thank you for the conversation, and I hope everyone has a great remainder of the day. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.